Welcome back to the channel. Uncle Benji here. We're back on our hip hop this week, the oral history of my hip hop collection. And we have the first video that I've done about another of my favorite artists, Open Mike Eagle, Midwest rapper now out in LA, where he's been his home base for many years now. But we're talking about one of my favorite Open Mike Eagle albums, Dark Comedy. This album came out in June of 2014 on Mellow Music Group. And in my opinion, it was a big breakthrough for Mike that really kind of set the stage for the sound of his music for really the rest of his career. He'd had music before this, released a few albums before this album came out. I'd been familiar with Mike for a few years before this, before I even knew his music, because we both posted on the same message board, Philaflava, back in era of like 09, 2010, 2011. So before I had ever heard an Open Mike Eagle song, I just knew him from being on the message board and kind of knew some of his perspective and his background. And then he started releasing albums, and it was really cool to see him start to build his own catalog and have a little success. But as I said, I think this album was kind of a breakthrough, and I don't know if it reflects on sales compared to albums that he had prior or after, but it definitely felt like after this album came out, there was more people in the scene that I was in that were tapped into his music and were kind of like, oh yeah, like Mike is someone that I really got a check for. But I got to give it up for Mike as a guy who always was really very true to his style, and his music has aged very, very well because of that. Because he didn't just conform or try to fit in with what other people were doing. He was very much himself. Whatever hobbies he had, whether they were traditional hobbies like watching basketball or, more kind of nerdy hobbies like being into pro wrestling, being into shows like Adventure Time and anime and comic books and a lot of different interests that Mike has always had that permeates throughout his music. But we'll get a little more depth into this album in particular because that's what the video is about. There's a lot of playful skewering of America and capitalism in this album, a lot of stuff that feels very prescient and in retrospect. I mean, be it coming out in 2014, and then this is like 6 years before the pandemic kicked off, but really there's a lot of stuff that it's like, man, Mike saw this stuff way back then and put it in a really cool way with his sense of humor in this album. He starts right off with Dark Comedy Morning Show, definitely one of the standout tracks on here, produced by Toy Light, a producer that had really good chemistry with Mike during this time, really kind of building out these songs and making them more than just a beat that he's rhyming over, like a real full production that he's getting from Toy Light. He has some great lines on here. For those who haven't heard of me, I'm bad at sarcasm, so I work in absurdity. And that's really kind of an ethos that runs through Mike's work, like I said, especially from this album going forward. Like, he kind of crystallized what's so great about his style and what makes his sense of humor different. Around this time and years after this, he was working in close proximity with comedians as well as rappers. He was doing comedy sets, so he's always been very entrenched in the comedy world. But these were things like he felt like, yeah, I'm trying to do comedy, but some people don't quite get my sense of humor, and it's because it's a little absurd. It doesn't fall into the traditional sarcastic comedy that a lot of people grew up on, like post Saturday Night Live. He's got his own sense of humor. And some of the prescient stuff, that this passage is really what I think of when I talk about a lot of that stuff on this album, because Google knows what's in my cabinet and Facebook logs all of my favorite sandwiches. And what they need the damn data for. To analyze this shit, they need a whole nother labor force. This was stuff that not a lot of people were talking about back then, all the data, that they're gathering on this, and we're seeing now, 12 years after, how hyper speed we are in that data accumulation. And we're seeing what they need it for and the labor force they have, the AI labor force that they're investing in, taking all these data centers to, who knows what end this is all going to come to. But this is stuff that back in 2014, Mike, saw right on the nose what was happening and could still make light of it as well. And you go into Qualifiers, the next track, like maybe still the best track in Mike's career, an anthem for the modern weirdo, like at that time in 2014. You know, being labeled ADHD or on the spectrum is much more common these days. Like in this era, 2014, it was just kind of becoming something that people were more aware of themselves. And while it's not specifically a song about ADHD or the spectrum, that Respect My Qualifiers is being able to express yourself as authentically, as clearly, or as unclearly as you want, whether you add that qualifier in to muddy it, being able to have that extra little qualifier of, no, this is what I mean when I'm saying that, this is where I'm coming from, this is who I am, is very much something that was becoming more in vogue in that time. And, you know, people truly being themselves and not being forced to fit into whatever conformity that they'd been surrounded by their whole life. He has a song on here, Very Much Money, Ice King Dream, just a truly beautiful song. The hook on here, my friends are superheroes, none of us have very much money though. It's just an amazing line. And he goes on to list all the different things that his friends do, how all of these different amazing occupations, whether they're in art or art adjacent, they're all amazing at it. They're world class, but they're not making a lot of money. They don't come from money. That shit's not valuable. Come say that to my face. That's what Mike, you know, I mean, it's a lot like talking about rap music. It can apply to other art forms too, but there's a lot of people calling rap music disposable, especially in this era and prior. I don't think I hear it quite as much as I used to because it's just, you can't avoid rap music now. But throughout the 90s, early 2000s, and up through this era in 2014, you would hear that a lot more often. And black artists have been used to hearing their art's disposable forever. So he really expresses that sentiment very well on that song, and it's a beautiful song to listen to. It's got a song on here, Doug Stamper Advice Rap. The song is so much fun and funny, and it absolutely bangs. It has a guest verse on here by Hannibal Buress, which might seem a little out of left field, but if you don't know the history here, Open Mike Eagle and Hannibal Buress, as well as Serengeti, all attended Southern Illinois University, which I always got a kick out of because my sister went to Southern Illinois for a year of college, and I believe it was like maybe probably a year or two before all these guys were there, so I don't think she was there at the same time, but that's always some funny history to me. But yeah, they were all going to the same school together, and Hannibal was rapping and freestyling back then with them. Even though at this time it came out in 2014, Hannibal had gotten famous from being on the Eric Andre show. Him rapping on here, at first to me was kind of like, what? And then I learned, I think around this same time, about that history of them all attending Southern Illinois and why that made sense that he's on there. And now, you know, years later, Hannibal's got his own rap career, and this was the genesis of it. And even more lore to this story, back in this same year, later in the year in the fall in 2014, I ended up going to a show in New York and Brooklyn, traveled out there. The first time I got to see my favorite artist, Billy Woods, at this show at a now defunct venue, Glasslands. And Serengeti, I believe, was the headliner for this show. Open Mike Eagle was opening. Arm & Hammer, Billy Woods' group, was opening before them. And they had a comedy set from Hannibal Buress at some point in there between the set. So all of these underground legends at this same show together in Brooklyn, truly one of the highlights of my music viewing life. Live music is getting to see that show with Open Mike Eagle, Serengeti, Arm & Hammer, and Hannibal Buress. I mean, not many people can say they were at that show. So that's some pretty incredible history from me that I love to share. A song like Idaho has a Kenny Siegel beat, maybe the first Kenny Siegel beat that I ever heard. It's a beautiful production, and it's a really kind of eerie, lonesome song about touring through the West and Idaho, and the vibes are just really thick. And there's a part of the verse where Mike is driving and his companion, fellow artist who's in the passenger seat, is supposed to be keeping him up and helping him navigate, but they've fallen asleep, and Mike is going through the frustration of being out here, having to be the only one awake and driving through this strip of road where he has no idea where he's at. So just that, you know, again, the absurdity of what it takes to be a working musician, being out here on the road, places you've never been. So he really captures that perspective and mind state well. Another of the absolute best songs on here is History of Modern Dance. This has an incredible music video, a crazy beat on here by Jeremiah J that's really different from the rest of the production on this album, but Mike just adapts to it like he does with any kind of production and really kind of lays out a manifesto of what the science of dance, you know, and especially American dance, where it comes from. You hear in a song and how it just kind of spontaneously creates this environment for people to create a dance on the floor and what all that is linked to. He name drops several, you know, popular dances throughout modern history in here. And again, watch the video for this one. I think you'll get the vibe and atmosphere of the song even better if you do. There's a lot of great videos from this album. Qualifiers has a fabulous video as well. So make sure you check out Mike's videos from this era. He's got some really great ones. Death Made Black is another of my favorite songs. One of my favorite lines on the album is on this song. The ego is the dirtiest of private parts. You don't believe in your arteries and capillaries, but they still work. Just, you know, a lot of really smart stuff that makes you look at the world in different ways, or stuff that, like, why didn't I think of that? Running throughout Open Mike's music, throughout stuff before this, stuff after this, to present day, you're always going to find that wittiness in Mike's music that is like, oh my God, I did not think of that. That's a great feature of Open Mike Eagle's music. The album closes with another masterful song, Big Pretty Bridges, and another Toy Light production, 3 Days Off in Albuquerque. And it's the same sort of themes about being out on the road, the van breaking down. It's kind of like a companion piece to Idaho, I would say. It has a beautifully sung hook. As I mentioned earlier, Mike is always incorporating the singing and the sing-song rapping, even more so. Like, this is one of the first albums where it really became a bigger emphasis in his music, and it continues even more so, where on some of his more recent albums, it's almost like it all blends together, where even when he's rapping, it's very much sing-song and very melodic. That's just, you know, you always kind of saw it there, but it's become more and more the emphasis of where his music is. And I think it gives him a larger audience, a little bit wider appeal, where he still stays very true to his roots and his sound. I also want to mention, you know, talking about the physical collection, the CD was the first thing that I bought. I'm not sure if this vinyl came out right when the album came out. This was 2014, so it was like right when I was starting to buy vinyl. So I may have bought this at the same time that I bought the CD. I'm guessing, though, that I bought the CD first and doubled back and got this vinyl later. It's a very pretty vinyl edition. So if you're able to get your hands on this, I definitely recommend trying to get that vinyl. CD is really cool packaging as well. And then after this album, he put out another EP that's kind of like a continuation of it, called A Special Episode of Split Pants Soundcheck. And it's got some incredible songs on here. Dark Comedy Late Show, the first song, is a real standout to me. He has a line on here that continues kind of the theme. He says, I gave up and became a Spotifyer. So this is 2014, so I don't know how long Spotify was around before 2014, but it wasn't that long, you know, but this kind of gives you an idea of when people really started embracing streaming. It was probably around the same time, 2014, 2015, when I started using Apple Music. I now use Tidal. I never have been a Spotifyer, but that's when he started using Spotify. This one closes with Ziggy Starfish, Anti-Anxiety Raps, which became a really big song from him as well. But I just wanted to highlight this little EP too, because it's definitely a continuation, the same type of themes that we have on Dark Comedy. As a lot of my favorite artists on here, you'll definitely be seeing more Open Mike Eagle videos on the channel. I'm pretty sure I've bought like everything he's ever put out on vinyl, and I have a lot of CDs, a lot of special edition, early CDs that he put out with really cool packaging and stuff that I'm excited to get to some of those. But this is definitely where I wanted to start with Mike. This was an album that I kind of wish I would have reviewed, but it came out right after I stopped blogging and reviewing stuff. And it was a little intimidating for me to review at the time because it had some themes that were ahead of its time that I couldn't quite put into words how I felt about it at the time. But now the album has really aged well, and there's a lot of gold on this. There's a lot of it you're going to listen back and be like, man, this was recorded in 2014. This isn't from like 2020 pandemic era, because it's so on the nose about so much stuff. But you know, if you're on the fence about Open Mike Eagle or haven't fully gotten into his music or not know where to start, you'll really see where his style is now, where it came from. A lot of the themes in his music, a lot of the references from his music are very thick and always present in all of his music, but this album is a great place to start. We'll be back next week with some fresh hip hop for you. Not sure, as always, where we're heading. We're going to figure that out in the meantime, but this week I was very excited to talk about Open Mike Eagle and this album, Dark Comedy. So till next time, Uncle Benji, peace out.